Cities of Le Corbusier. Born in 1887, the Swiss-French architect, artist, designer, writer and urban planner Charles-Édouard Jeanneret, aka Le Corbusier, is one of today's strongest influencers of the inventiveness and boundless suggestions he addressed in his solutions through a modern eye. Le Corbusier lacked the formal training in architecture, but in a short period of time, he began practicing architecture and designed his first house in 1905 at the age of 17. He earned his reputation from the vast of design and modern principles he applied. Le Corbusier gained his experience when he started traveling at the age of 19. He told his father, "I don't ask you for money, don't ask me where I'm going, nor what I'm doing. I myself have no idea." He took a train to Italy to arrive at the piazza dominated by Milan Cathedral, then continued his trip to Vienna through Budapest. Corbeau visited Florence, where he had a lifelong impression about the Florence Charterhouse. Through his journey, he studied the buildings. Every detail was sketched in his notebook, from watercolors of frescoes and different flowers to structural details. He traveled to Paris and worked at the office of architect Auguste Perret, then traveled to Germany to work at Peter Bern's office along with Mies van der Rohe and Walter Gropius. After moving to Paris in 1916, Le Corbusier acquired international status within less than 10 years. In 1922, he opened an architect's studio with his cousin Pierre Jeanneret. Together, they completed an important series of individual houses or studios for artists in Paris, including Villa Savoye. In 1927, Le Corbusier set out his manifesto of the 5 points of new architecture, which soon gained recognition as one of the founding texts of modernity. The construction of Villa Savoye marks the peak of the Purist period. It helps us understand where Le Corbusier's ideals come from. We can easily elaborate the 5 points: pilotis, which are the columns that support the building's mass, opening the ground underneath to free green space and allow automobile movement. The free facade could be designed flexibly since it had no structure, function, and this can result to cut the facade horizontally to light the whole space. The separation of the load-bearing columns from internal walls, allowing free modification of the floor plan. And in contrast to what happened below the building, the green roof recovered the sunlit green space lost there. Not long after Ebenezer Howard realized his first garden cities, Le Corbusier saw the machine age as a chance to remake society and improve the lives of all. Corbeau's ideas, which reached their ultimate form with the Radiant City, proposed nothing less than the complete destruction and replacement of cities with his concept of perfect order environments. The contemporary city of 3 million was presented by 35-year-old Le Corbusier in Salon de Automne in 1922. It suggested a utopian city of tomorrow, which would be built on a clean slate. Architects usually chose as complicated sites as possible because by that the site can make decisions instead of them. So by choosing a blank slate site, Le Corbusier was choosing the hard way to plan. Planners used to design the traditional way, spreading horizontally. On the other hand, what Corb proposed was different. From here, Le Corbusier would plot a central business district of 24 identical cruciform glass skyscrapers raised on pilotis so as to leave the ground level for an unbroken greenery scene. He thereby aims to increase the density while decreasing the congestion by having 95% of the area open and include various squares, restaurants, and theaters. Each skyscraper includes a tube station, part of a complex transportation system compressed of as many as half a dozen layers of distinct types of traffic, including highways raised above the ground and a central aerodrome for air taxis. Housing would be in a similarly geometric low-rise buildings around the center. The 8-story buildings that were arranged in zigzag rows were accommodating the density of 120 person per area. Yet again, the open spaces can be found in between those rows. Garden cities can be found outside a protected ring of woods, fields, and sporting grounds reserved for future expansion. What Le Corbusier thought to be the ideal modern city did not receive the hype he wanted. People thought it was weird and they were confused and slightly fascinated by his vision. Despite the fact that it was not taken seriously, the criticism on the idea of the class-based conception of life and the scale of centralization that Le Corbusier has created were valid, and this plan was later on developed by Le Corbusier himself as a vision of a development for central Paris. By the time the contemporary city did not succeed, he wanted to make a point out of it. Le Corbusier decided to apply this idea to the dense central core of Paris, which made no sense to Le Corbusier, and to be replaced with the 18 identical, cruciform, 60-story skyscrapers that first appeared in his previous urban plan. The new plan seems to be a direct transposition of the diagram of the contemporary city for 3 million that was drawn in 1922. The two new axial traffic streets that pierced through the city, one on the east-west and one on the north-south, link very crucial points. Yet again, the same problem faces Le Corbusier, as he focused on the central city, and that's what critics attacked. In 1930, Le Corbusier presented another urban plan, but this time the juxtaposition of the different land use had changed, and the very first idea was rearranged to become the Radiant City. This updated vision of the perfect city was like no other. The Radiant City is a linear city. In this city plan, he went back to what he first started with, the human body. An abstraction of the human body is applied in the analogy of the city. The skyscrapers of the contemporary city, which serve as the business area, was rearranged to be away from the center, as the head of the man. The main highway that ran across the city is the spine, in contrast with what he did before. The housing that now forms the arms are in the center. As for the factories and the warehouses, which sit after the residential part, stands for the legs, and the heavy industry would be at the end as the feet. The main criticism, the class-based concept which Corb created when he decided to create a luxury residential area and a more modest area for the workers. On the other hand, there is no separation between the rich and the poor here, but the utopia of Corbusier remains, with the sorting of the functions, the order, the freestanding high-rises and blocks, free circulation, with the abundance of the open spaces. The new Indian Prime Minister, Nehru, sought to build a new capital after the 1947 partition split the Indian state of Punjab, leaving the former capital of Lahore in Pak's territory. The newly formed government of the redefined Punjab needed a new administrative seat as well as a new city to house the huge number of refugees. Chandigarh was regarded as a unique symbol of the progressive aspirations of the new republic and to present the struggle of its independence. The aim was to provide healthy living even for the poorest of the poor, through generous cultural and social infrastructure as well as equal opportunities. Choosing the architect was critical at that point. What Chandigarh needs is a Western skill, who went through the struggle, live among those people and know very well their needs. But the vision, they had acquired a good modern architect who would be able to develop a new concept originating from the forces of the projects as well as being suitable for India's climate. The Indian government first wanted to assign a Western skill to be able to design the city according to the people's needs and has the ability to accommodate them as well as respecting the culture and the climate. But the Prime Minister, Nehru, stated that the vision of the modern, independent and strong city acquired a modern architect, and by that the project was at first assigned to the American planner Albert Mayer. He was chosen as he served as an engineer in India with the US Army during World War II, and by that he already had some experience in the country. Mayer even pitched the idea of building a new planned city in India to the Prime Minister, so he was the right one to plan Chandigarh. When drafting the plan of Chandigarh, Mayer and his fellow architect and collaborator Matthew Nowicki, they looked at the plans of the garden suburbs in the US by different planners. The idea of the neighborhood design with the linear parks has its roots in the garden city, inspired by the utopian author Ebenezer Howard. The site is set between two rivers, and the streets fan out in a curvilinear fashion, and they divide Chandigarh into superblocks. Those superblocks keep the traffic on the edges and serve as a park-like setting in the middle. This mini neighborhood that was created had paths for pedestrians in the central area. Just like Mayer's inspirations, the idea was like Radburn, New Jersey, concept of the neighborhoods. Nowicki was the one behind the brilliant idea of having the linear parks that run through the entire city. It completed the design and the vision of Mayer and the vision of the government that was looking for a modern capital for Punjab. All of the ideas and the concepts had nothing to do with Le Corbusier, until the project had to come to an end after the tragic death of Matthew in 1950. And Mayer and the Indian government parted ways. Again, the search for a planner for Chandigarh was going, and the authorities were fascinated in the European-style modernism, and there was no one that exemplified that description better than Corbusier. Taking over from Albert Mayer, Le Corbusier produced a plan for Chandigarh that conformed to the modernist city planning principles, in terms of the vision of urban functions that he had already mastered after all the criticism and development in his series of urban planning projects. In addition to the function separation, the hierarchy of roads and pedestrian networks were well studied for the plan of Chandigarh to match the utopian modern city concept. Most of the major ideas of Mayer and Nowicki were maintained. The basic frame network and the idea of the superblocks remained but were developed to the thinking and vision of Le Corbusier. Minimal changes were made and the concept was elevated to become closer to Corb's vision of a modern city. The superblocks that were suggested by Mayer and Nowicki now became supersized so that three of what used to be a superblock for Mayer can now fit in one superblock in Corbusier's plan. The superblock is called a sector. Each sector would represent a self-sufficient entity with space for living, working, and leisure. These sectors to be connected through a grid of straight streets and path network developed along the hierarchy of 7 types of circulation patterns, from V1, the highways that connect the city to others, to V7, the streets that lead to individual housing. Later, V8 was added for cycling and pedestrian paths. The grid reflects Le Corbusier's order and utopian approach for the modern city of Chandigarh. The generated form is a mashup between different styles and concepts, from a garden city to a modern geometrical grid-based city. The result is more of a modern garden city. Though it looks nothing like Le Corbusier's ideal vision of a city, the centralization and the vertical expansion, people still would criticize this garden, modernist hybrid. Here comes the point that as a planner, Mayer, who developed several master plans from Mumbai and Delhi, while designing Chandigarh, he would consider how the Indian way of living could be, and he was designing for the comfort of the residents of that city. Le Corbusier, in comparison, had only spent a few days in India before starting to work in the design, and he would focus on the architectural symbolism in the built environment. It was more of a designed city rather than a planned one. This gets us to the point that Chandigarh is not a badly designed city. Actually, it is one of the wealthiest cities in India per capita, and the modern garden city design resulted in less density compared to other Indian cities. However, the horizontally spread out plan has led to more vehicle usage.